Welcome to this webcast brief. The following is from our September 21st presentation, CA World in the Cloud with Todd Michaels.
Can be done. So one of the use cases that we were looking at is CA has decided to start utilizing Amazon Web Services for their infrastructure as a service. They've decided to deploy CA Workload Automation AE into the cloud, and or formerly AutoSys, and just deploy that out there. What are they integrating it with? They're integrating it primarily with SAP, Informatica, a few other scripting applications, other applications that they've written for themselves, for reports, for auditing, payroll, things such as that. So, and that's what AutoSys is currently automating within CA. It's doing all the financial balancing the books, it's doing payroll, it's synchronizing employee information, it's doing audit and production control. So why did we move to the cloud? Why did we go there? These are some of the specific reasons that we looked at, and what CA is looking to reduce as much overhead as possible for the system maintenance, for the administration that I was talking about earlier. So that was a primary factor in this. If we move to the cloud, we don't have to worry about the hardware, we don't have to worry about those resources. We wanted to implement true high availability and disaster recovery without having a secondary disaster recovery site. CA does have multiple data centers for disaster recovery, but with the way we've configured it, and I'll show you what it looks like in a moment, we've configured it so that if something happens to one of the service areas, that it will come up in the second service area. And then the last, one of the other reasons that we've considered that is cost savings on development systems. So being able to get new applications, new systems for development on demand is difficult when you're doing everything within your data center. So we've looked at, and by having the development systems in the cloud or as an infrastructure as a service, we're able to bring up machines and pay for when they're being utilized, not when they're turned off, not when they're not being utilized, or not when they're deleted and we want to create a new system. So this is some of the primary reasons of why we've moved our workload automation to the cloud. Now the way this looks is we've configured it so that we have AutoSys installed in two separate zones. One's on the east zone and the other's on the west zone. Now, these aren't separate instances, they're all the same instance. So we've configured it with a primary and a shadow scheduler in high availability. The primary scheduler is in the east zone, and the shadow scheduler is in the west zone. This way, like I said, the way we have it configured, we have the databases are being synchronized. The EEM servers, or the security components, have multi-write set up so they're being written to both simultaneously. And for Workload Control Center, we have a load balancer for the users to be able to monitor for the browser to automatically fail over. So that if something is to happen to the AWS East zone, the primary scheduler fails over to the shadow scheduler, and the AWS West zone kicks in, and that starts taking over all of this. So it happens for both, whether it's high availability or disaster recovery, because we're talking about servers or the infrastructure being on the East Coast. If something happens on the East Coast, then it fails over to the West Coast. So the way we've implemented it is to provide not just high availability, but also true disaster recovery. So like I said, if we just had a hurricane still sitting a couple hundred miles away from here, if that were to come and hit Amazon Web Services data center, then that would have taken out the AWS East zone and then put it over to the west. So that this way you have that type of disaster recovery and high availability. Now, each of these servers are communicating with the different agents that are in CA's data center. So we have an SAP implementation, we have other application servers, we have Informatica, we have all of these other agents that are within our data center that Autosys is communicating with. So as long as we provide the appropriate communication ports and communication areas, we'll be able to communicate back and forth as if it was our own data center. And that is something that I'd like you to keep in mind. Implementing this infrastructure or implementing Autosys in the cloud or workload automation in the cloud is just like implementing it in a remote data center. All right, as long as you have network connectivity, as long as you are able to communicate with those different areas, it's just like having it in your data center. Okay, so as those components fail over and it runs just the same as it would like that. Now, this configuration is for the latest release of Autosys, and as you can see, they're using Microsoft SQL Server as a back-end database. They are CA. We are using RDS, for those of you familiar with what that is. It's basically Amazon's database component that they provide as a service, and we're able to utilize that. Our GIS, or our internal IT department, created or worked with our development and utilized an unsupported workaround. So we are working on certifying RDS as a back end, but as of today, we have an unsupported workaround to make it work if that's something that's a requirement for you. All right, but this is how we have it configured today.